Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 7. Just over 50% through, or just about 50% through, so we've come a long way and we still have a long way to go. This week, we're going to be mainly looking at evidence and claims and then the relationship between the two. So evidence is support. It's what we pull from secondary sources. It's the elements of the primary source that we extract to analyze. And then claims are the arguments that we're trying to make. It's the point, right? People say, well, what's the point of your paper? What's the point of your research? Well, your argument should be advancing toward that in some way. And you can think of claims as subpoints, right? So your paper is guided by an overall, overarching big point. This is the thing that I want to prove. This is what I want to say. And then the individual claims are the pieces that underlie that and support what you're trying to say. So here's what I'm trying to say. Here's the support for what I'm trying to say. And then evidence lays underneath the claims and supports the claims. Think of it all in a big pyramid with your main argument up here, point, at the point of the pyramid, being supported by claims, which are themselves supported by individual pieces of evidence. A single piece of evidence doesn't actually tell us much, but a constellation of pieces of evidence can build a very, very powerful argument. So during this week, we'll continue our discussion of secondary sources. So what makes a good secondary source and how can we tell? And then once we've identified those sources, how do we integrate them effectively into our writing? And that can sometimes be the challenge, right? We've identified a source that looks good. How do I put that source in conversation with myself? Do I use direct quotes? Do I use the source just to illuminate what I'm saying? Is a large block quote necessary? Do I just refer to the author in their main argument? There's no single answer to that. It depends upon the type of source, the type of proof, and or the type of evidence rather, and how you plan on incorporating that evidence into your overall argument. If it's very important, maybe bring in a few quotes and cite it multiple times across many paragraphs. If it's not very important, maybe just a passing reference in a single sentence is all you need. And that's something that you more or less perfect through practice. So we'll then discuss how to do so at the level of both ideas and sentences, learning about the MLA citation style. So ideas and sentences. Ideas here you can think of as paragraphs or systems of paragraphs that are exploring a concept or engaging with a specific concept. And then sentences are when you do that on the very minuscule level. Sentences build paragraphs, so sentences are snippets of ideas that build an overarching idea in a paragraph, and then several paragraphs together build a concept. Evidence appears in sentences, is explored through claims in paragraphs, which build arguments through series of paragraphs. Writing is very, very structured, is very, very scaffolded in its simplest form. Which is more or less what we're trying to do right now. We'll also continue exploring our course theme, the musical political, and we'll begin discussing how to link the claims that we make in writing with the appropriate evidence. So you've made an argument, you know what you want to prove, how do you use the appropriate evidence to support that argument? You've identified the correct sources, how do you extract what you need from those sources, basically? To this end, I put together a Prezi for us, secondary source models, how to use secondary material. It does run a bit long, so you may want to space this out over a couple of days. Of course, you don't have to. It's probably about an hour. All you got to do is sit down and listen to it. And what I do here is I take us through several examples of different kinds of secondary material, and I extract useful information from each of our secondary pieces, right? So we go through, and there are like little arrows on the side, and it points to the important bits that we really want to highlight. The overarching topic, and this was just chosen because I like to have something to focus on so that we're not just looking at random sources. The overarching topic was the Vietnam War experience. So we're talking about Vietnam, we're talking about personal experience, we're talking about something that has to do with the war, but not necessarily the war itself. So to that end, there are newspaper articles from a decade or so afterwards. There are movies that were clips from movies that were included right afterwards. There are academic articles on pieces that were, or on movies that were popular right about the time of the Vietnam War. There is a relatively recent article from Politico on the nomination of Chuck Hagel for Defense Secretary. Basically, a lot of information from a lot of different sources, and I'm trying to show you the diversity of different sources that you can approach while evaluating the varying levels of utility for each of these sources. So all of the sources we're looking at are credible. We've discussed what's credible and what's not credible. These are all credible sources. But even though they're all credible sources, that doesn't mean they're all equally useful for constructing an argument, for extracting the kinds of information that we'll want to include in an effective argument. So that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, I cover this more or less in the Prezi itself. So take some time out, pay attention to that. That's going to be very important. Also very important this week, the Writer's Companion, Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. So Chapter 5 is what are secondary sources and why do we need them? Be sure to read it and read it carefully. This is supplemental to the Prezi that I made, but it's going to be a very, very useful kind of supplemental. They provide other examples and different rationale. The Writer's Companion, Chapter 6, Writing the Paper, 63 through 69. This is specifically about the kinds of papers, the kinds of analytical papers that we are going to be writing in this class, that we have already begun writing in this class. So it goes without saying, you really need to pay attention to this. Be sure to pay very close attention to Chapter 6. In addition to all of this, and I'll say, like, once you've completed the other material, then we can move on to the thematic material. We're going to have a reading, Empowering the Self, Making Choices, Creating Spaces, Black Female Identity via Rap Music Performance. This is mostly about black female rappers in the late 1980s and early 1990s and that whole cultural scene. So it'll be a little bit divorced from your experience, but that's part of why it's useful, right? It'll be new to all of us. This is from the Journal of American Folklore, and I've created a discussion board for this material to follow afterwards. I would like for everybody to post 300 to 400 words commenting on something they found interesting about the article or an argument they disagreed with. And then in addition to this, I would like for you to, again, practicing extracting evidence, I would like for you to go to the article, the source material, and extract a quote or extract a section and use that to advance some kind of argument in your discussion post. So these discussion posts are going to be less about our reactions, though that can still be included in there. It's going to be less about our reactions and more about the substance of the article itself. We're going to pull out evidence and we're going to practice using that evidence. And again, this is a low-stakes way, so it's graded on participation in this case. It's not graded on utilization, which it will be in the secondary source integration. This is dipping your toes in the water before things get serious. All right, and then to sort of cap everything off, we have our writing assignment for week 7, which is the ARP Step 2 Annotated Bibliography. I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, we covered what an annotated bibliography looks like, provided a few examples, and I did a video talk about them. What we're going to do here is you're going to put your own together. So be sure, go back, look at that material, find out what worked for the students in the examples, what didn't work for them. Look at your comments. Go rewatch my video, right? Pay attention to what you need, what you absolutely must have to prove the claims you're advancing in your primary source analysis, or to advance the claims you're making in your primary source analysis, and try to pick sources that are going to help you as we continue on to write the final paper. All right, that was about all that I had covered for now. I'm going to join you guys in the discussion of the article this week. It's a very, very interesting article. I had a chance to read it. I don't necessarily agree with all of the claims in there, so feel free to criticize, right? That's one of the good points about academic writing. Everything is an argument, and we can disagree with arguments. We can agree with them, but we can also disagree with them. So if you find something in there that you think is not exactly a strong claim, then locate evidence for that, right? Locate evidence for it, bring it up in your discussion post. I want to see this discussion board get lively. All right, I will give you guys a few days to get started on that, and I'll join in probably about Tuesday or Wednesday next week. But until then, have a great week. I'll see you guys next week.